Hello and welcome to this episode of HBCU. I'm your host, Dee Brown CEO. Joining me on the show today is Cleve Mesidor. Cleve is a graduate of Howard University. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Cleve. Hey, so I want to get started by just really understanding, how did you select Howard University to further your education?
Well, I will say that I do have a sibling at the other HU. My sister went to Hampton.
Okay.
She is a graduate of Hampton University. We actually went to our universities at the same time. And so for me, like many people of my generation, I am a member of Gen X. You know, the TV show A Different World made HBCUs, something exciting, something transformative that we had to be a part of. And I think there's data that shows that because of A Different World and The Cosby Show, there's a whole generation of Gen Xers that actually, sought out HBCUs. So for me, I wanted that experience, but politics is in my blood. So Howard made sense because it was in Washington, D.C.
Right. So talk to me about your experience at Howard University. What was it like? What were the faculty members like? And just what was the whole experience being there on campus?
Yeah, I have a master's from Howard University, a master's in mass communication from the School of Comms. And so, and obviously through the graduate school, Howard was a transformative experience because, it was not just being on a campus full of diverse Black people, but also it was the learning. It was the opportunity to engage with top researchers across the different schools. When it came to my research, I did my master's thesis on how U.S. policy has been informed by the national media. My thesis committee were these rock stars, and because they were so great, I was interning at CNN at the time. I was able to get Wolf Blitzer to sit and talk to us about his experience with the Gulf War, with Bernie, and so Howard is a wonderful place to actually enjoy, have fun. It's the best homecoming across the HBCU landscape. Don't let anyone tell you different. But I do think what for me was great was, the research, the academic, the minds. It really forced me to be a critical thinker.
So talk to me about just the research program at Howard and the rigor of that program, but also how that help you become the person that you are today?
Yeah, so it is a supportive network. So as I said, once I chose the focus of my study on international affairs, but the intersection with media, Howard had the Ralph Bunche Center that actually focused on international affairs. I was able to go there and do some research and speak to some of the folks who were focused on international affairs. And certainly the School of Communications, oh my God, the wealth of knowledge there. We know that Frederica Wilson from CNN comes from the School of C. Being able to connect with them on just, how I was approaching writing my master's thesis, because I really wanted it to be much more interesting than a typical master's thesis. So I was able to get that guidance from there. And then just, the support, the access to the various libraries that I needed, all of it was there. I went to SUNY Albany for undergrad. My sister for her master's, she went to UMass Boston. But we both talk about the experience being at an HBCU and just that support. And the support is not just, oh my God, you're great, do this stuff. It's what do I need to succeed? Those resources are there, and the mentors are there as well.
So speaking of mentors, who are some of the mentors that you had that made your journey through the master's program successful there at Howard?
Yeah, interestingly, I mentioned I went to SUNY Albany undergrad. Patrick Swigert, who became the president of Howard, was the president of SUNY Albany. So it was interesting to have that continuity. And there was a dean there at Albany, Carson Carr, who, when President Swigert became president of Howard at the time, actually connected us. And then certainly, there's a woman from the graduate school called Gwendolyn Bethea, who recently retired a few years ago. She was truly a mentor in the school. And then I have to say that I continue to go to and listen to, Howard's Chapel every Sunday, because that actually was very, very, powerful for me. The head of, Howard's Chapel is just so, wonderful and kind, and, creates a space where you actually feel like you belong and you connect. So I would say, oh my God, and I can't believe I'm blanking on his name. He probably is one of those folks. I wrote a book, and I even mentioned him in my book, because his very simple, consistent prayers, when I feel like I'm, stuck, or, trying to figure out a way, I go to those words, and they actually make a difference.
So you talked about your thesis topic, international affairs and the influence of media. How did you select that topic? But I also noticed that you said you wanted to make it interesting. So why were you so passionate about that particular area of study?
Yeah, so communications is my sweet spot. And when I started grad school, I actually got an internship at CNN's Washington bureau, and that's when I met Bernie Shaw and Wolf Blitzer. And as you remember, they cut their teeth during the Gulf War. They actually became the icons. If you remember, Bernie Shaw was on assignment there, and really, reporting from, the front lines. And so for me, it was, how, especially at that time, there was an intersection, an alignment, a connection in terms of what got reported, how it got reported, and how it was supported. So for me, it was, I'm Haitian American. I'm sure, listeners are hearing the accent. And for me, I've always been, bicultural, like, and political conflict, has always really made me think about, how we actually engage as people, as global citizens. So for me, as a communications junkie who really looks to international affairs, I was fascinated by how there were specific conflicts that were impacted by, media. Like we've had presidents say that they were watching, I believe it was the war in Rwanda, who was the president at the time, who said we was watching a conflict and said we need to do something there. So we want to believe that, a lot of the time we go into war, we go into a political situation because it's the right thing to do, or because there was some, climax that actually forced us to get there. Oftentimes it is the communications mechanisms we have. And, I know, I'm a Gen Xer, the revolution would be televised. It was one of the things we grew up with. And for me, I looked at it through that lens, right? It will be televised, but what influenced it? So my master's thesis was about the nitty gritty of how those influences occurred and what happened during those conflicts.
So you mentioned that you did an internship at CNN Washington's bureau. Tell us a little bit about that experience, and then how did Howard position you to get that internship?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. The internship at CNN's Washington bureau was a game changer for me. And I started Howard, and I applied for the internship, not knowing. And I think there was a real need to have a Howard grad as an intern, because I interned for Late Edition at the time, a show that's not even on the air, now. And this was in 1999. And, I think, during my interview, I put forth that I would actually add fresh perspective, and that my experience at Howard and HBCU would be valuable to CNN. And Late Edition was a show that covered international affairs as well as domestic affairs. So So, it was great being, an HBCU intern there. But I will say, after my internship ended at CNN, I actually got offered a position in CNN's newsroom and got to cover, some great stories, including, when Hillary Clinton got the nomination for, being a U.S. senator, which I remember covering that. And I remember covering so many great stories that really actually made me want to go into politics. It was ironic because CNN's Washington Bureau obviously covers politics. And so I wanted to follow this track of going into programming. But the more especially after the internship, working in the newsroom, the more I actually got to be out there. I remember I covered the Chandra Levy investigation. Some of your
Wow.
viewers may remember that.
Yeah.
And the more I did that, the more I wanted to be part of the process. I wanted to be there. And it was that experience that made me transition. I actually left and went to go work for Janet Reno's governor's race. That was my first race.
And so you also mentioned that you are passionate about politics, et cetera. So where did that passion, or when did that passion develop within you?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I'm Haitian American. So obviously, Haiti's revolution continues to be symbolic for so many people. But for us who are Haitian American or Haitians, I was born in Haiti. I left Haiti when I was 8 years old. So I grew up here in Queens, New York, and Hollis, Queens. So hip hop became a big influence for me. But if you'll remember and I moved to the US in 1981, during the 80s and 90s, especially in New York, especially, hip hop actually had a really political, anchor, core to it. Right. So I grew up when, Run DMC were on the Avenue. I used to be on the Avenue. I remember LL Cool J, being outside of my junior high school. And so for me, I grew up around this whole concept of revolution and change. And I believe for us Gen Xers, we believe that we actually needed to make a change, wanting to make a change. And when we look back to, we just saw Straight Outta Compton with NWA, and, I was a big Tupac fan. I do think between my, being Haitian and where, politics, and freedom are core to who we are. So freedom is our greatest legacy. And I think hip hop marrying that, the experience at CNN, at Howard, it was just natural transition to want to go into politics. And as I mentioned, I worked on Janet Reno's governor's race. I was her deputy communications director. I worked on the national campaigns. I even worked in Congress and then served in the Obama administration. I was a presidential appointee in the Obama administration. But I actually even ran for office myself. When I moved to DC in 99 for grad school, ended up staying here. And in 2007, I actually ran for City Council, Ward 7. I raised $55,000 for my race. I did not win, but it actually helped to solidify, my whole worldview on politics, like, because I had seen it from covering it for CNN, from working in Congress, from serving in the Obama administration. Running for office really showed me the tolls that that piece took, and I believe that's what took me to cryptocurrency. Right, it was just a manifestation of all of those experiences.
Right, and I'm going to talk to you about your company, your foundation as well. But I want to ask you before I go there, how do you feel that your educational experience at Howard prepared you for the business woman that you are today?
Oh my God. I believe that it was one of the most powerful experiences. It wasn't just an academic, time being at Howard. It was being on sacred ground. It was being in a place where you felt, it was a privilege to be there, and you had to use that education, that degree, to do something more, to do something greater. I remember I worked in Congress for Barbara Lee, and Shirley Chisholm was her mentor. And I remember Barbara Lee talking about her. She worked with the Black Panthers program, and I remember she said, when Shirley Chisholm decided to run for president, Barbara Lee, worked on her campaign and brought her to campus. And Shirley Chisholm told her, "That's wonderful that you are very politically astute and passionate. Get an education and then do something about it." Right. So for me, I felt like Howard, you come to Howard wanting to be an activist revolution, but it also tells you now you have a mandate. Now you have to do something greater. You have to be something better. And I think for me, that was the difference. To this day, all Howard grads are proud, but it's not just, I'm from the real HU. It's here's what I did for this with the degree, right? Here's how I'm continuing that legacy. So the Mecca becomes a part of who you are, and you feel accountable to it, a certain responsibility to that legacy.
So talk to me about the Blockchain Foundation. You serve as the executive director. What do you do at that foundation?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, from politics, I went into crypto. And I actually became a bit disillusioned in politics. While serving in the Obama administration, I realized that politics had its limitation, right? That there were some things I could not accomplish, that it was very difficult within those limitations. So it was while I was serving in the Obama administration in 2013 that I first heard about Bitcoin. In 2013, a good friend had a Bitcoin project, and he called me and said, "Hey, can you help me with a press release?" And I said, "Sure." And I never heard of Bitcoin, did the research, learned about it, and helped him with the press release. So it stayed in my radar. And then in 2015, there's a Black director that did a movie called Dope. And oh my God, the movie solidified what Bitcoin was, how it operated it. And then I started going down that rabbit hole. And in 2017, I decided to work in crypto full time, all the time. So I have been working in crypto for over 6 years. And I started my journey into crypto as an entrepreneur. I created my own startup. I wrote a white paper, got funding. I was building logos, specifically a platform, a decentralized platform for activists, for revolutionaries, for change agents. Because let's be honest, activists have so many tools for organizing, for impact, but they don't have a platform where they can actually be social, where they can actually engage, where they can actually commiserate about losing all the time, when they can actually date. So I initially went into crypto to create a platform based on Ethereum, which is a blockchain. And while I was on that path, in December 2017, Bitcoin hit $20,000 for the first time, and all of a sudden, Washington started paying attention. Wall Street started paying attention. Silicon Valley started paying attention, and most people don't realize these entities were very late to crypto. And in 2018, you had Congress and the IRS trying to figure this out. And there weren't that many of us in crypto who understood crypto and also how Washington worked, right? So I had to lean back to my experience working in Congress, serving in the Obama administration, because I knew there would be a gap with the Black caucus, the Hispanic caucus, Asian Pacific American caucus. So I started working with the Blockchain Association, the lobbying entity, the advocacy group for the industry, to really focus on inclusion and access, and built on that work. So I put entrepreneurship on the side and started building a platform to ensure that as crypto grew as an industry, that Black and Latino communities, who are the earliest adopters and the largest adopters of cryptocurrency, also benefit. Because decentralization is a pathway to ownership, which is the pathway to wealth creation. And but we knew, the more I did this work, the more I realized there was a gap with education. So in my work with the Blockchain Association in 2021, we decided we needed an arm that would focus on education to be a bridge for public institutions, those nonprofits, those civil rights groups. So in 2022, we launched the Blockchain Foundation. I'm the executive director, and today we actually go into communities, work with nonprofits to actually educate people about blockchain cryptocurrency. We want entrepreneurs to know that there are pathways for access to capital through DeFi. We want creators to know that there are new tools that they can be using to protect their intellectual property and to monetize their work. Right? So there's so many opportunities for our community, but we know that information is always a void. So that is the role that I lead with the Blockchain Foundation. It is one of the roles that I do in crypto, because I actually have specific projects that I'm actually building as well. We are at the future frontier, and it is a frontier. We're at the starting point, and we have to make sure that the conversation we did not have in the 1990s when we were contemplating the internet. Right, in the 1990s, there was conversations about the internet, what it will be, but there wasn't conversations about accessibility or inclusion or a digital divide. And so I'm part of a group that's making sure that these conversations are front and center, and that we're talking about how do we create pathways for ownership, and how do we ensure Black and Latino communities, which are the largest adopters of cryptocurrency, don't become simply consumers and are producers.
So take a couple minutes and tell me and my viewers, why do you feel that a person, young or older, that's considering going to Howard, whether it's undergrad or master's level or even doctoral level degrees, why should they select Howard University?
The reason that if somebody right now is contemplating, where should I, embark on my academic career, the reason they should look to Howard, because it literally is you're not applying to a school, as I mentioned earlier, like you are looking to be part of a legacy, part of, a pathway where there's an expectation, where it's not just about Black excellence, it's about, serving humanity. It's about doing, at Howard, you get a lens for the whole African diaspora, for the whole Black diaspora. It's not just about, art history here in the US. It is our footprint on the continent of Africa, across the continent of Africa, across Latin America, and certainly within the Caribbean. And when you look at whatever you're going to do, right, especially as a person of color or Black person, Howard will open the world to you. It will give you that prism of, you don't have to open your business just in the US. You can look to opportunities across the continent of Africa or in the Caribbean or Latin America. And those are the doors that are open to you at a place like Howard.
So before we wrap the show up, I want you to just take about 60 seconds to just tell us why you are so passionate about being an activist revolutionary.
Yeah, I am a daughter of Toussaint Louverture. I am a Black woman in America. Change, social impact is important to me. I want to change the condition for people who look like me. Like, I want to make sure that I leave a legacy in the world. So 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, we're seeing progress. So for me, every choice I've made, from going to Howard, from choosing, my professional pathway, it has been to change the world, to make an impact, and to make sure I'm always clear that I'm not going to change the world, but one step at a time, one Black at a time, one decision at a time. We're planting seeds that will grow.
Well, Cleve, I want to say this, that the work you're doing is very, very impressive. I think that it really highlight and showcase the talent that come from our many HBCUs around the country. And I just couldn't, I don't have enough time on this episode to really talk about everything that I would like to cover with you, because you have just so much knowledge and so much experience in so many different areas. But I do appreciate you taking time out your busy schedule to be on this episode of HBCU with me. And I do not want to leave or conclude this episode without first presenting you with our HBCU Lifetime Achievement Award for your continued commitment to historically Black colleges and universities, and all of the success that you've had that highlight all the great work that those institutions do for communities of color. And to my viewers, I want to thank you for watching this episode of HBCU. I'm your host, Dee Brown CEO, and remember, without you, there's no me.